Welcome to the Today's Leader podcast, the podcast for the leaders and entrepreneurs of today.
Way to go, guys. Way to go. Keep it going. Good job, guys. All right, Paul, I see you. All right, Charlie. Finish on. Let's go.
Hey there, it's Coach Curl here, and welcome to episode 297 of the Today's Leader podcast. Today I share a fascinating conversation with a very deep thinker. Now, Tom Beakbane is president of Beakbane Brand Strategies and Communications, a company that has delivered over 20,000 projects to Fortune 500 companies or customers since 1986. Now, he resurrected the concept of consilience after attempting to account for the gap between textbook theories of human behavior and his experiences creating marketing communications. He closed the gap by tapping into his passion for understanding developments at the frontiers of science. He has an honours degree in biochemistry and neurophysiology from Durham University in England. His book, How to Understand Everything, Consilience, A New Way to See the World, makes him an incredibly brave man. To write a book that seeks to help people understand everything. But that being said, it's an incredibly helpful book for anyone who wants to understand the realities about human behavior. Now, this is a fascinating conversation with too many insights to name here. So without too much further ado, we'll share a notice from our sponsor, and I bring to you Tom Beakbane.
The podcast is brought to you by Think and Grow Business, the home of the Think and Grow Business Mastermind. If you're serious about growing your business, get serious and join a mastermind group today. Find out more at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au.
And it's my pleasure to welcome to the Today's Leader podcast. I have Tom Beakbane. Tom, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you, Tony.
You're from Toronto in Canada. And the reason why we're talking today is because you've written a book. Now, the book's called How to Understand Everything, Consilience, A New Way to See the World. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about, your story and how it came to be that you've written this book.
Sure. Well, I'll start with my story. Born in the UK, brought up in Worcestershire, and had a great education, loved science, went to Durham University, studied neurophysiology and biochemistry, but never wanted to be a scientist. I always wanted to be a business person and an entrepreneur. My dad and I guess 8 or 10 generations before had owned businesses of one sort or another. So when I left Durham University, I joined United Biscuits in the marketing department. They put me through a really good training in the sales force and then in the marketing department. Worked there for a couple of years, and then my cousin wrote to me from Toronto and said, "Why don't you come over here? There's a shortage of marketing people." So I came over for a 2-week vacation and went on lots and lots of interviews and was offered a few jobs with various different packaged goods companies and accepted the one with Pepsi-Cola. And they looked after my immigration, and so I've been living here ever since. I worked for Pepsi-Cola for a couple of years, and then that was at the dawn of computer graphics and desktop publishing, and I saw that was an opportunity. So back in 1986, I decided to set up a computer graphics agency doing design, and I've been running that company ever since. What's that? 35 years.
Desktop publishing, that's terminology you don't necessarily hear a lot of these days. So just saying that brought me back to another time. So so let's have a look at the book, How to Understand Everything, Consilience, A New Way to See the World. The bit of a brief is that it's helpful for thought leaders to understand the realities about human behavior. So why? Why is it helpful for, say, a thought leader or a coach to read your book to understand the realities about human behavior?
Sure, I'll answer that question, but I'll just first explain why I wrote the book. I've always been mystified by these different realms in my life. In marketing, you've got to deal with the art, you've got to deal with the science, the metrics, the actual sort of the engineering parts of a business. Plus, I've been deeply fascinated by science and the way the world works. And like many people, the realms of spirituality and religion have always been of interest to me, and I've done a lot of traveling. I love sports. And it always just seemed to me that these different realms of my life were disconnected, and that always bugged me, because I've always believed that as you go through your day, and let's say go from your home life to your business, you don't want to be switching personalities. It's not healthy to be different people with different groups, and so I've wanted to reconcile those different realms. So the reason I wrote the book was because I wanted to put together a manual for my staff. Back in, I guess, about 1998, the market was changing particularly fast. The online world was expanding. I was trying to hire people. I found that if they had been educated in marketing at university, they were sometimes very difficult to deal with, and they didn't really understand what we did as a company. And so I just wanted to write this manual called Total Quality Communications that picked up on some of the techniques that were being used in manufacturing, like Kaizen and Six Sigma and those sorts of techniques, and try and apply them in the marketing world. And in order to do that, you've got to define what quality is, but also you've got to understand how the world works and how the brain works. And so I wanted to come at this whole matter scientifically, and that's when I started digging into why there was such a disconnect between the business books and the psychology books and what I needed as a business person. And so I started trying to write this Total Quality Communications, and the deeper I got into it, the more perplexed I became, and so it turned into 20 years later this book. But I don't think I answered your question, which is why why write the book? Why is it useful for people, and particularly for thought leaders? And the way I explain this is, if you're going to be at the top of your game, which is not a metaphor that you'd like, and you want to be a thought leader, or let's say you want to be a tremendous programmer, computer programmer, you really need to understand how a computer works, what the internet is and what a semiconductor is. You can look at the pixels on a screen and you can get so far, but you're never going to be an amazing programmer if you don't understand what's happening behind, in the box. Yeah. And so my argument is, if you're dealing with people as a leader or as a salesperson or as a consultant, it's useful to know actually what's happening inside our head and body, not the mythology of it, not the ideas that we've grown up with, that reason is separate from emotion and the left brain is different from the right brain and all those sort of popular ideas which aren't useful. Actually understand what's happening, because my argument is, if you just look at the science now, we know how the brain works. You don't need any strange theories. Just read the books.
What is consilience? And because in being honest and transparent, it's a new term to me. I hadn't heard it prior to us connecting to do this podcast interview. So what actually is consilience, Tom?
Well, consilience is a word that was coined by an English fella back in 1840. A guy called William Whewell. He was a
Yeah.
he was a cleric and a professor and a polymath. He was a mathematician, a scientist, a poet, a brilliant man. He invented the words like scientist and iron and many of the words that we use to this day. He was a remarkable fellow. And he coined it to mean the jumping together, the insights that create that create knowledge from connecting two previously disconnected subjects. And so I use it to mean that now physics and chemistry are indivisible. They've joined. They've also joined with biology. There's no division between physics, chemistry, and biology. And if you look at genetics, that sort of connects those subjects to what we see in out the window, with animals and plants. So my argument is, because of the jumping together, the consilience of all of these different realms, we can understand things in ways that have been impossible up until this moment. So I believe that we're at a unique moment in human history. Sounds overblown, but it's astonishing, what's the tools that scientists and mathematicians and experts have to investigate what's happening inside our bodies and in the big wide world.
So is the book heavy in the academic or the scientific world, Bob, or is it written for the everyday person?
I don't use any scientific jargon at all. If you pick up a book on, sort of an average book on consciousness, you read words like sentience and words like that. I don't use words like epistemology, even though the book's about epistemology, which is the sort of the science of knowledge. I write about highly scientific matters, like what's happening inside our cells in our bodies, how our brains work. But I use metaphors. I think you're good at using metaphors and like metaphors. I use lots and lots of metaphors. So I use the metaphor of an orchestra to describe the behavior of neurons in our brain. I would say not everyone is interested in reading non-fiction books these days, but if you have a little bit of a stomach for technical matters, and many business owners do, if you're curious, my book is not a tough read. It's got lots and lots of anecdotes from the business world, and life, and many of the people that have written reviews online, and they're all genuine reviews. A few of them are from my friends, but funnily enough, my friends have given me 4 stars. All the other ones are 5 stars, and a lot of people said they just couldn't put the book down. I know that's a cliche, but there new ideas in every single chapter. I just got off a Zoom call with a fellow living in Denver who said, well, he just couldn't keep quiet about how many threads it had connected in his mind. Now he was a consultant, a person trying to help people who are going through midlife crises. He's a business person. He's a technologist. He's a bit of a biologist as a background. So he did understand the significance of some of the things that I explained about intracellular mechanisms and evolution, but you don't have to be interested in those things to derive a lot of help and meaning from the book. So
what's the difference? I guess so. I'm a leader in an organisation. I'm looking at getting my team to perform better. So how does your book or the concept of consilience help me do that?
There are many insights that I think are useful. I mean, I would say one of the uses is that you can get beyond some of the metaphors that we've used that aren't helpful, like the idea that, for instance, emotions and logic are sort of separate realms and they have different systems in the brain. They don't. They're completely interlinked. I think another important insight is it's necessary to understand what words are. Like, we use words, we write them, we speak them, but we don't really understand exactly how they work. We all use them, and I think by understanding the realities of what they are, you can use them better. You can understand how words actually help us sort of navigate through a three-dimensional world and change other people's minds. Other aspects are that I explain very clearly that the meaning of words is dependent on the context and on the history and the background of the people who are speaking them and hearing them. And so that means that one has a scientific grounding for the skill of listening. And I know you're a big believer in developing listening skills. Well, my book explains the science that underpins that. And I could go on and on. I mean, there's just no end of tidbits that will help one use words better and persuade better and realize that all forms of persuasion are going to work better if you're completely genuine and you don't believe that it's some form of coercion or there's something devious about it.
Manipulation techniques.
Exactly.
Or something. It's interesting. You were just talking about words, and often from my corporate history, there's been many a time that I've had to sit down with someone and discuss an underperformance issue, and usually what you've got within the room at the same time is someone that's taking notes around the discussion, and whether it's formally documenting the discussion that takes place, or making some notes so that they can be referred back to at a later date. And I've always found that compelling because, as you were saying, words are relevant in context, and I guess as part of a leadership perspective, you always made sure you were saying the right words so that as people would refer back to that particular discussion, that there was never any concept around the words whether you were doing the right thing, even though your tone of voice or your facial features or your body language or the context or the perception that we were trying to build with the words may be a little bit different. So I've always found that compelling. The written document there around the discussion is a written document of the words, but the words are then potentially got the ability to be taken out of context. So quite interesting.
Do you mind if I just sort of comment on that? Because my book actually has a number of ideas that contradict mainstream ways of thinking about communication and words, particularly the way academics come at the whole matter. There's sort of in traditional linguistics, language has been viewed as being symbolic. The words we use are symbols. And I explain that that's not an accurate way of conceptualizing language. The mechanisms that we use to create words, in other words, our fingers and our larynx and lungs and lips and tongue, it's physical, and it's from a developmental and an evolutionary standpoint, spoken and written words are a continuation of the communication that we're constantly doing with our eyes and body. So if you look at the animal kingdom, let's say a dog, I mean, everyone communicates. Do you have a dog? Everyone communicates with their pet in a very rich way, but it doesn't require words. And so, to nearly everyone, it's common sense that communication isn't just about words. So I believe it's very useful to understand the full breadth of how we communicate. Where we look is a form of communication. How worried we look, how attentive we look, leaving aside the words that we use. And I think occasionally leaders overlook the power of non-verbal, non-written communications because we're all, far more than we understand, we're all hypersensitive to these subliminal forms of communication. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, it does. Absolutely. So it's such an interesting world, the world of communication. And often we can say one thing with words, but mean something completely different by the way that we look or the facial, as you were saying, the facial features of worry and concern. If you're trying to paint a positive image of the world, but you look like the whole world's just about to come crashing down on you, people are going to take that more so than the words that you're saying. So absolutely true. Tom, what's the difference between top-down thinking and bottom-up thinking?
Okay, this is a huge idea. It isn't necessarily terribly easy to grasp. Okay, but I'll try and do it as succinctly as I can, and I'll put it in some sort of a historical context. Sort of traditionally, particularly in academia, but also in the scientific realm, we've imagined that the world is. It's possible to categorize everything in the world according to words. So I look out at my window here. I can see trees. There's bushes. There's leaves, and so we imagine that these categories are sort of cut and dried. And I would say, well, that's a top-down way of looking at things. But in science, particularly, we imagine that the world is ruled by theory, by the inverse square law and Boyle's law, like all of these theories that we find in physics books. And there's a new way of thinking about everything in the world that has, I think, been sparked by computation and mathematics. And that is that the world is emergent. It happens from the bottom up. So an example here, not to get too sciencey on you, an example is the human body. We imagine that the brain controls everything in the body, like a king sort of lording it over, its empire, its domain. Yeah. But when you look at the way cells organize themselves, every cell looks after itself. And so if you look at a human fetus growing, each cell is self-programming and our body builds itself from the bottom up. And now you'd say, well, that's a long way from what we need to know as managers. But I would apply it to societies and to organizations. So a traditional way of looking at an organization is, okay, you got the boss at the top, and then you've got systems, financial systems and marketing systems and manufacturing systems. And I say, well, actually, there's a better way of looking at it. Or another way of looking at it, which is look at the micro behaviors that every employee and everyone involved in the company uses from moment to moment. If you get the micro behaviors working, so that everyone is working optimally and everyone is communicating optimally, whenever they do anything together, get the stuff at the bottom working, and magically everything else works out, including corporate culture and all the things that you talk about. So you need both ways of thinking. You need the planners and the strategists sort of thinking ahead and looking ahead. But also there's another way, which is bottom up, because that's the way the world is actually built. Does that make sense? It's a bit of a heavy. It does. It's a heavy concept. But it's a powerful concept.
I'm sort of relating it. I'm relating it, Tom, back to corporate culture, because ultimately it doesn't necessarily matter what the leader or the CEO says the culture is. The culture is actually what you feel more so in the front line or in that bottom up process. So can consilience be used to help build company culture or improve company culture?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, not only company culture, but one's sort of personal health and well-being. Because if everyone walks into a company and they're feeling healthy and they're feeling they want to be part of a team, and then every micro interaction makes them want to be there, that you've got your culture. And I've been through my career, I've dealt with many hundreds of companies, from world leading leaders in their field, Apple and IBM and Procter and Gamble and Unilever, through to, startups. And you develop a sense, within minutes of what a corporate culture is. And it's not what's in the mission statement and the vision statement. It's how everyone feels. And I write about my feelings. When I walk into a company, after you've dealt with them a little bit, sometimes you feel, God, it's good to be here. God, I'm looking forward to dealing with these people. And other times you're thinking, and you just feel it in the pit of your stomach. What am I doing here? Oh God, I want to be somewhere else. I'm looking forward to the end of this interaction. Yeah. So, I go really, really deep on all of that in my book, because if you look at the genesis of the emotions relating to our interpersonal reactions, you can take it back to, in evolutionary terms, what I call the attachment instinct and the mothering and the parenting instinct. Instincts that have been around for hundreds of millions of years. They're still in operation all the time with us, and it helps to understand that.
And that's how do you use this now to work with clients to help them, or to resolve some of their potential cultural issues? Or how do you use what you've written about now with clients?
Well, Tony, I hate to tell you this. I'm 64 years old. I've been running my business for 35 years. I've got a fantastic team. I love them. We've got great clients.
Yeah.
I live the way I live. I deal with my employees the way I do. I wrote the book, not really for myself. I wrote it for other people. I don't really implement any of the ideas myself, because I embody them. I try and have fun in my life. I'm not trying to grow my company. So don't use me as an example.
So for people to get the book and to get what they want out of that book to help them drive and build better relationships, it's not necessarily part of what you do. You're now,
right.
You embody the book.
Yeah, I'm not pimping my agency or consulting business. I'd love to sell some books, but actually my main motivation is encouraging everyone who's in a position of responsibility to understand the realities of human behavior and our frailties as a species and society. So we learn to talk about difficult matters in a more constructive and open and forthright way, because frankly, I'm really scared about what's happening in society, with free speech and the complete lack of appreciation for the complexities of the world. So, my book's called How to Understand Everything, but really, one of the messages is the more we understand, the more we realize how little we know.
It is quite frightening in the world today. It's very divisive. You're either on this side or that side, and there doesn't seem to be a great deal of relevance given to the other side of thinking, and it is something of worry. So in saying that, has your book now generated some discussion in relation to this that you're aware of?
For the people that have read it, yes. Especially thinkers. As I say, I was just talking with this fella from Denver, and he was like, Tom, we got to do something. We got to spread the word. Put me in contact with other people that have read the book. This is important. And a few people, I'd say a dozen or 2 dozen of people have sort of reacted in ways that are really, off the charts, encouraging. But it's early days, and so this is the reason I'm doing podcasts like this, because not everyone is into deep thinking. I'd encourage you to actually see if you can download the audiobook and listen to it, because I think you'd actually get a lot from it.
It's certainly piqued my interest, so it's certainly something that I'll be diving into, and I guess that's one of the luxuries of speaking with people like yourself all around the world. I've ended up with this massive sort of a book collection that I'm slowly winding my way through. But some of the fears that a lot of people face that are facing the conscious anxiety that we're seeing in relation to just it seems to be it's my way or it's no way, and I think that level of thinking has to, somewhere along the line, we've got to get the ability to have respectful discourse happening again, so we can disagree with someone without necessarily reverting to the personal name calling, which is what we tend to see, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So
can I explain how I approach that subject, if I've got time to do this?
Excellent, please do.
So my whole explanation of the human brain is that we don't really know. We don't have conscious access to why we do the things that we do. We imagine that we do, but we don't. So many of the movements and the anxieties that we see now in society are being expressed, as we see, but the underlying reasons are broader anxieties, like deep anxieties. So, when we, worry about climate change or vaccines or, politics, left and right divisions, or, Black Lives Matter and social justice, all of these things that are triggering people in different ways. I call them, I call most of those words tribal banners, because depending on which tribe you belong to, Trump means one thing or another thing. Black Lives Matter means something or the opposite. So I explain how these words develop the meanings that they do. I call it pointification, which is sort of is a technique we use in marketing a lot. It's branding. It's the same as branding. And I explain how those tribal banners relate to our social instincts that I was talking about. Our ability to fall in line, our nurturing instinct and parenting instincts, and attachment instincts. But I believe that many of the anxieties that we're observing today in society relate to, frankly, inadequacies in our education system. I believe our education system hasn't been teaching the skills that it should. So kids are coming out and they've been sort of taught like some half harebrained ideas, but they're not useful ideas. They don't have the skills to do all the things that you do. Communicate and plan and do podcasts and so on. And they're anxious, and justifiably anxious, because of computerization and robotics and social media. And we just haven't got our head around some of these massive changes that have been happening. And so consequently, there's a lot of anxiety. There's worry about the economy and the future. And that's playing out in concern about COVID and social justice and climate change, and my argument is we need to be able to discuss all of those things. We need to be able to discuss them constructively, but let's also recognize just how deep these problems go.
I 100% agree with just about everything that you said there, and I think that the more that we can listen, pay respect to other people's ideas, try to understand where they've come from, what their method of thinking is, and it seems that the more we've got some people trying to equalise society, is that the more we're getting lopsided with our thinking. So it's quite a challenging space, but in saying that, for leadership of the world, so we senior leaders or political leaders or even leaders of organisations, what are some of the traits that you believe they need today to be successful in leading today and in being that sane voice of leadership, I guess, moving forward? What are some of the traits that you'd like to see in leaders?
That's a good question. Before I answer you, I actually want to give a shout out, and I wasn't actually thinking about this before, but just talking to you and thinking about the Sunshine Coast and Queensland and Brisbane, I've got lots of fond emotions when I think of Australia. And I have to say this, and I'm not just being sycophantic.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of people, there are more people in Australia who are thinking in ways that are sane and balanced than in many other countries. and so I got to give a nod to some of the thought leaders and sense makers in Australia, because I really enjoy reading some of the materials that are being generated by folk in Australia. I read Quillette, for instance, which is an online journal, and that's published by Claire Lehman. I'm not sure where she lives, but I think Sydney. And so anyway, that's a shout out to Australia and Australians. But anyway, answering that question about traits, I think one trait is curiosity, and the ability to genuinely say, what do you mean by that? So if you use a word like that triggers me in some way, whatever it is, I should have the maturity to say, well, what do you mean by that? And really try and understand it from your perspective and like how you came to that. So I love it when someone like lands a crazy idea with me, whatever it is, creationism or nationalism or some bizarre political perspective. I don't go, well, you're stupid, in believing that the Earth is flat or whatever. I go, no, why'd you say that? Actually, an example of that was, I was doing a podcast a month or two back with a rapper from Buffalo called Bobby Neptune, and he believes in aliens. And I don't really believe in aliens, but at the same time, it'd be strange if there aren't other life forms in the universe who are dashing around here and there in one way or another. And he explained that he believes in aliens because when he was a child, he loved physics and astronomy, and he believed that the Earth was going to collide with the moon. And so he figured that the only way that was going to be prevented from happening was if aliens came and saved him. And so I just appreciated understanding his journey, and I'm cool with that, So if aliens come and save the Earth, well, that's good. Anyway, other traits. So the ability to listen, the ability to be curious. I would say the ability to handle complexity. Now, one of your sort of watchwords is simplicity, and I agree with that. You need to be able to communicate ideas simply, and you need to sort of organize one's life as simply and honestly as possible. But at the same time, the world isn't necessarily a simple place. And so if you're leading an organization, every now and again you've got to dip into the dirt. And you need to have a curiosity and an ability to understand areas where you're not expert or comfortable. So if you're not comfortable with programming and computers, well, make an effort to at least understand what you don't know. And it's the same, understand sales, understand art, understand different aspects of communication. So I think a good leader needs to be curious and not believe that the world is organized according to their degree. So if you're an engineer, don't assume that the world conforms to engineering formulae, because it doesn't.
I think I could continue to ask questions, but I know that our time's starting to get away from us, Tom. So it's going to be part of my immediate things once I finish our discussion is to get a copy of your book so I can really start diving into the thinking that has brought this book into existence, because I think that there's some definite relevance and some stuff that I definitely resonate with. So, but before we go, what book has had the biggest impact on you in your journey?
I've read so many books. Recently I look at YouTube videos and I just spend a lot of time online because there's so many fantastic resources. But over the years, I've really loved books like Gödel, Escher, and Bach, and sort of books about metaphysics. But I think actually it's scientific magazines that have had the biggest influence on me.
Okay.
I used to subscribe to a magazine called The Sciences from the New York Academy of Sciences, and I just loved it because the writing was so poetic and beautiful, and they didn't show diagrams of sciencey things. They actually just showed pictures of art, and it's just a beautiful magazine. It stopped publishing in 2002. I guess because it didn't appeal to that many people, but it was a beautiful publication, and I would get it every, I guess, 2 months, and I would just read it in awe. Yeah, so I'd say that.
So is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you at this stage, Tom? So anything that I suppose this is your chance to jump on a soapbox or talk about something that we haven't talked about as yet. Have I missed out on something?
No, I don't think so. I mean, my book touches on so many different areas, and it tries to sort of draw them together. So my book isn't like pretty much any other book you find, because most other books concentrate on one, discipline or another, or one topic, and they become very focused on those particular topics. So my book doesn't do that. But I guess my book, even though it's very deferential to experts and scientists who have written these beautiful books in their field, my book really is highly critical of academic siloed ways of thinking. So I guess one question would be, Tom, how mainstream and non-controversial is your book? And my answer to that would be, well, if you actually read it and make an effort to understand what's bugging me, it's academia in general needs to be rethought in a big way, and the kids coming out of our academic institutions need to be taught differently, because now sort of that intellectual arrogance is not getting us very far.
Well, Tom, I take my hat off to you. Anyone that can write a book or attempt to write a book that's called How to Understand Everything is a very, very brave person. So I take my hat off to you, and I'm really looking forward to diving into the book. So, Tom, how can people connect with you? How can they grab a copy of the book?
Well, the book is available on Amazon. It's available as an audio book, also on Audible, a hardback. It's still priced very reasonably as an e-book, so as a Kindle book. So you can download it for, I don't know, just a few bucks. I'm going to be putting the price up shortly. But to communicate with me, just Google me. And there's a website called howtounderstandeverything.beakbane.com. That's BEAKBANE.com. And there's a form there that just goes straight through to my email. And I would truly love to engage with people who are interested in the book and read the book. And I'm hoping to put some groups together of deep thinkers who can change the world.
Thank you very much for your time today, Tom. It's been a pleasure. once again, you've opened my eyes up to some new way of thinking, some new thought processes. I'm looking forward to diving into it. Thanks for your time, and thanks for investing in today's leaders.
Thank you so much, Tony. It's been a great pleasure. Keep up the great work.
Join the group of people impacted by seriously simple stuff to get you unstuck. The first book by Tony Coach Curl. Available at Amazon, Tony's Simple Stuff provides the tool for people to master your life and aspirations. 20% of every book sold supports Carter's cause.
Thank you, Tom, for those fascinating insights and a fascinating conversation. It's one of the more intriguing conversations, I guess, that I've had on the Today's Leader podcast. The one line, however, that I want to try and bring some value to as well from the podcast is that Tom made the comment that that ultimately became the title of this podcast. The more we understand, the more we realize how little we know. Now, the more you know, the more it is that you would want to know, or that you should want to know. And one of the things that I'm forever curious about is that we look at our understanding of the world in which we live. We look at our own bodies. We look at all the research that's being done on the brain, for example. And the more we understand, the more we actually realize how little we know. Now, the way that we understand ourselves should not be like the way we understand ourselves now, should not be the final definition of ourselves, and it won't be the final definition of ourselves. Just as the opinions and beliefs that we have now should also not be the final definition or the final concept that we take to the grave. In my mind, I think knowledge breeds curiosity, because the fundamental truth is that the more we know, the greater we should acknowledge how little we all know. So we maintain curiosity, and that helps us maintain growth. A huge thank you for Tom for investing in today's leaders. And of course, his details are in the show notes on how you can link with Tom and purchase his book. Now is the time for you to take control of your leadership growth, especially in this disruptive world in which we're navigating. Our aim is to help you become the leader you need to be today. If you're looking to build better leadership skills, check out the Today's Leader website at todaysleader.com.au. Our website showcases our podcast and our magazine, and we're pleased to say our masterminds are now available right from the website. Supported by our network site, Today's Leader is a collective mindset for the leaders and entrepreneurs of today, forging the path of success for tomorrow. The mindset to make a difference, the ability to create an impact. Think and Grow Business hosts our Today's Leader Masterminds. Think and Grow Business, where we focus on personal, professional, and business growth. Book your free 30-minute discovery call right from the homepage at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au. You are standing stronger, braver, wiser. Don't forget the golden rule. You know what that is. Just don't be an arsehole. I'll see you all again next week. Bye for now.